I'm Kent Mulgett with Kelownanow, joined by Ron Mattiussi, Kelowna's city manager, and the city manager that is retiring in March. I can't believe this is true, Ron. You seem like such a fixture at the city.
Yeah, well, thank you. Sometimes I feel like a fixture at the city, which is making this exciting, actually.
You're not 65 yet, but
Nope.
you're choosing to bow out a little early. Why?
When I took the job and when I was appointed 12 years, almost 12, Ron Born corrected me, it's 11 years ago, I thought that I would do it for 10 years. And I made a commitment to myself that I would do it for 10 years because I felt that, you have about 5 years to really imprint yourself in the organization, make the changes you need to, and the next 5 years is about improvement and succession planning, and then be done. And I was really worried I'd be stale. I was really worried that I never wanted to be the guy that people would walk around saying, "When's he going? When do you think he's going to leave?" You know? And so to me, that was the sort of the mental timeline from day one. And stayed on a year or two more, and that was as a result of the last election. And people saying, well, look, we're going to have a new council. Some real veterans are leaving. Could you at least stay on so that the new council, can get through that transition? And we have. So it's time to go.
Okay. I think it's important for us to talk to you because when you look at the last 22 years or so, what a remarkable transition in Kelowna. I mean, this city has really changed. So let's start from the beginning. When
Sure.
you first got here, it was to run the planning department?
Yeah, director of planning.
You came from Edmonton.
Right.
What did you find when you got here? Things weren't really so great in the 90s.
No, but I could say I've always been a lucky person too, and I think I came at the time where people understood there had to be changes, and people understood that we had an OCP that was put in place about 10 years before official community plan. The city had seen unprecedented growth from 88 to about 94, and wasn't dealing well with that growth. It overwhelmed the ability of the city to plan. And so I walked into a community that was now ready to plan. And
Can I just interrupt there?
Sure.
Because I think around that time, you used to hear people mention Kelowna as an example of bad planning. Like there were plans in place, but every week there would be a developer before council with a plan that was outside of the plan, and they would say, all right, go ahead. And so we had this from Bedrock Village, Flintstone Bedrock Village, right into the city, all the development along the highway. So Kelowna sort of had a bad reputation for planning when you got here, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. It did. Someone called it, when I asked about Kelowna, they said, well, we call it Surrey by the Lake. No disrespect to Surrey. But, I think it was a bit unfair. And again, all these things have to be put into proper context. Kelowna had gone through, from 82 to 88, one of the worst recessions in its history. And so that's the backdrop. And all of a sudden, with Expo and all those other things that happened, you had this and Hong Kong money, moving out into the Lower Mainland. So you had this huge push of people from particularly the Lower Mainland into the Valley at unprecedented levels. And so, so you have this, we're open for business.
Right.
And all of a sudden, when they opened the door, there was a stampede, and of course, when people could look at that council of the day and say, well, they approved it. Well, they had just gone through a recession. So, development wasn't a dirty word. It meant this is a way that we could come back. And I think it was the scale of that rush that was the difficult. And they didn't really have up-to-date plans. And so that's why by the time I got here, they began the process of a new official community plan. And that paved the way really to build a good foundation. So that in subsequent years, even though it's always been high growth ever since, really.
Right.
We had a few slow times. We've always had a really good foundation at that point, so that councils weren't making ad hoc decisions. They were making within some kind of context of the plan.
But were you an influencer in sort of directing the council that they could say no to some developments that really aren't part of the vision?
I think if rather than I always said I'm not the world's best planner, but I think I'm had the skill of being able to speak to council in a way in which to translate planning into a way that they could understand the principal ideas behind it, and not to sweat the small stuff. I mean, the big controversy over a yellow awning, I think, like we have issues that we have to deal with. Yellow awnings may not be nice to some people, but at the end of the day, it may not be. So I think it was helping to get council to articulate what was important, and the planners to understand that, and kind of explaining each side to each side. And so I would say it was more about the long game and the process of building credibility. When I got there, it wasn't the council, but but the planning department saw the development community as evil, and that their job was to be the guardians of the city.
Right.
And it was really important for me to bridge that gap. So you had the development. It was a war between the development industry and the planning department, and to again try to explain those two sides to each other.
Well, you're a good plain talker, which makes my job easier right now.
Good.
But I think somewhere along the way there was a few things that happened. One was it seemed that there was sort of a dislike of density when it comes to housing.
Yes.
And somewhere along the line, I think the public has started to actually appreciate seeing density in certain properly placed clusters. Right?
Yeah.
And so you had to change the public's mind, or maybe that was council's job. I don't know.
Yeah, I think what we saw were that we had a land reserve, and which would not allow what would be like a normal growth out of a city like Calgary, call it sprawl or whatever. So you had that constraint, and so I think our focus on saying that we could densify as long as we, in fact, build livable communities. And I think that was the concept that started, people started seeing the things that they liked. I mean, you look at Pandosy today, I think it's done pretty well. It's a nice community. It's good. And so, people started seeing you can actually do density well. If you do density well with amenities, with some commercial walkability. So it was really being able to demonstrate that density is not the enemy. It's the context, how you build it, where you build it.
Right. And for the downtown, I mean, what a transformation. I am so proud when people come to visit now and you take them through the downtown. You must be just bursting with pride. It's so at night when it lights up, it's a beautiful downtown, and it wasn't always. Was it?
No. I think the downtown has been a great success. A lot of times when you looked at our bricks and mortar going to make a difference, is sidewalk going to make, but in the end it really does. I mean, if you walk down there, you could be a Wednesday night in November, and there are people walking downtown and enjoying just being down there. Every night, and I get into my car and drive by the skating rink with the lights and the music. It's magical, right? It's magical. Yeah.
But some of our viewers weren't around back when our downtown, was Deadsville.
Well, our downtown, South Pandosy. You remember this if you went to Robertson's. In 1996, you'd be able to park your car almost right up to the doorway on a gravel strip. Remember? South Pandosy had gravel strips in the core.
Pandosy was just out in the boonies, really.
Yeah. And the downtown, again, there was sort of no rhyme or reason. And now you have, I think you have these jewels of parks that are great walkways. It's changed a lot. I think sometimes when council's made some decisions, and even some controversial ones, you almost want to say to people, look, we've done a pretty good job. Right. Why do you think we'd want to screw it up? Right?
I don't know what it's like inside of City Hall, but I think that sometimes the people who are in the area that manages traffic are looking at how many cars you can move successfully from one place to another. And sometimes that runs right against planning, doesn't it? Because maybe moving cars isn't a downtown's purpose. And obviously that was the plan with Kelowna, because you got rid of lanes.
Yeah. No, it really was the cornerstone. People back then, like Lorna Gunn, Peter Schultz, Dave Rush, they were all on the downtown association as we worked on the plan. And one of the things was to make it pedestrian friendly. So that goes back to some very early times, and everything that and I think sometimes people don't understand that these things are evolutionary. They're not
right.
You don't change these things overnight. Looking back, it's not necessarily a long, as we both recall what it looked like.
Yeah.
It's not a long time frame, but it does.
Yeah.
It's an evolutionary process.
Yeah, ultimately the whole personality of downtown has changed, and for the
Completely.
better.
Yeah.
And what about your? I mean, people all seem to like you and your management style, and I think managers of all kinds of businesses could maybe look at you as an example. What was your? How were you able to see so much creativity happen from the city while being the boss man? What's it like inside there to deal with Ron when you're working at City Hall?
Well, I think most people tell you that I'm pretty easygoing, although they'll question that. I'm demanding in a way that demands excellence, but I try to do it very collaboratively. I would like to think that my style is about setting a vision of what's important and how we'd like to do it, but then turning that over to the professional, whether it's it's a parks planner, an engineer, IT person, communications person, say, I think we have to do a better job on neighborhoods. And the person turns around and creates a strong neighborhoods program. And I look at them and go, that's 100 times better than I would have ever thought of.
Right. So,
Yeah.
so not to be too detailed in the direction that you set.
No, I think set the goal, set the objective that we want to achieve. I would like strong neighborhoods because we're a city of strangers, really. We grow so fast that unlike some cities that grow very, very slowly and you're there for generations, our city grows very fast. So in our neighborhoods, very transient, right? People move here from everywhere and they don't really have those strong roots. So how do we build stronger neighborhoods in that kind of community, which I think is really important, by the way.
Right.
So to me, the goal would be, I think we have to focus on building strong neighborhoods are the core of a strong city.
Yeah.
But then turn it over.
Right.
I'm not going to tell you how to build a strong neighborhood. You tell me how you're going to help us build a strong neighborhood.
Makes sense. So you were Ron Mattiussi, the planner, and then you became the city manager. And
Right.
the point at which we first saw you in that role, you didn't really have it yet. When the fires hit, you were
Right.
speaking for the city all of a sudden, and
Right.
and not always giving me all the answers I wanted, but
I know.
you were there.
Give you what you need, as much as I could.
That was your ordeal by fire, sort of
Absolutely.
getting a taste for that job.
Yeah.
And did that sort of temper you for the position, would you say?
Well, it's certainly one thing it did do is over the
It's
years.
2003.
2003 is that it's hard to intimidate me. Certainly when you go through that kind of ordeal, most of life now fits into some perspective, right? Like,
Right.
okay, sir, I know this is a really important problem, but that's not
Yeah.
the end of the world. We'll help you solve it. So I think it sort of tempered my perspective of what's important, because when you face that kind of crisis, you really see like the darkest hour, right?
Yeah.
It's the darkest hour. But through that exercise, it also honed the leadership style that said, "Okay, team, we have the fire's out of control. We're not.
Mm-hmm.
Help me solve this problem." Coming in and saying, "The fire is moving towards southeast Kelowna." Well, is that a problem? Well, Seekit has chlorine tanks. Hypothetically, we have a problem. Okay, what happens when fire hits chlorine? I don't know. Okay, come back in an hour and find somebody to tell me what happens. And it wasn't up to me to know. It was about asking the right questions, right? Like,
Right.
I didn't have to be an expert on fire or chlorine, but as the leader, I knew somebody better know this so we could get. So it was a very collaborative process.
Yeah.
And in the end of the day, though, I always tease my staff. I said, the democracy ends right above me.
Mm-hmm.
From here down, it's a dictatorship. It's a very benign dictatorship, but it is
Right.
a dictatorship. And so I think the ability to both inspire, to collaborate, I don't think I know more than my staff. I have great people who are experts in their field. But at the end of the day, I'll make the decision.
Right. One perennial problem that the city has, and I hear people grappling for what the solution is. Personally, I don't think there is a solution, but homelessness and
Mm-hmm.
drug use and all that goes on the downtown streets can get in the way of all of what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it'll ever be solved per se. Do you? It's something you need to manage.
Yeah. No, I've been dealing with homelessness as the director of planning, now as the city manager, for a very long time, right? It's grown. The issue has grown, and I don't believe we'll ever solve the problem because of the nature. But I do believe that we can manage it with the help. But it's going to take alignment of federal, provincial, city, community, and we all have to align. I mean, we have this very complex array of problems occurring. We have a poverty issue, we have a drug issue, we have a mental health issue, and as I have always said, and the city has police and bylaw. Not exactly great tools in the mental health, drug addiction,
No.
but yet a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, it's really, really important that if we really can't control drug addiction and what the programs, then it's really important that we're the advocates, going back to those levels of government that do, and say, look, at the end of the day, we have a problem. We have people who are on the streets, in many cases, are not capable of making good decisions.
Yeah.
How are we going to get them? How are we going to get the help to them? How are we going to get them into some supportive housing? How are we going to do that? Because, being on the streets is moving them on is not the answer. I mean, it's a short-term solution, but it's not the answer.
I remember one mayor from years gone by, who will remain unnamed, telling me that, well, if we look after and accommodate these homeless people, then people will see that and more will come.
Yeah.
And maybe there's even an element of truth to that, but I don't think you could approach the problem.
No, I mean, and there probably is an element of truth, and that's why it has to be tackled at a national level. I mean, I think BC gets more than their fair share of people who drift across the country because wouldn't you?
If you're going to be homeless, I'd rather be homeless in Kelowna.
If you spend a winter, exactly. If you spend a winter in Winnipeg, and you can afford a bus ticket, then you're heading this way, and that's just human nature. So, but now the question is does the federal government recognize? Do we have the data? I mean, let's take real data. The mayor's point was that if we have good services, people will come. Well, let's do the data. Let's look at analytics. Is that what's happening? Okay. So, what do we have to do to deal with that? Does it mean more facilities in the north?
Right.
I mean, are they coming down here from Williams Lake? Because there's nothing in Williams Lake. That's a provincial problem, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we should all be advocating for more facilities theoretically in Williams Lake. I think the great tragedy that occurred was back in the 60s and 70s, because we had such horrible institutions that were many times people who had mental illness in particular, but other problems, were basically out of sight, out of mind.
And then we closed the doors.
And as society, that was the answer. Hey, my brother's not well, but he's in this facility, and we go and visit him once a month. And we closed the doors because we found abuse, we found all kinds of things wrong. Well, but we never really replaced it.
We didn't open another one.
Or what we said at the time was, well, we're going to look at a different model. We're going to look at small group homes. But then we cut the funding.
No, and this is supposed to be, interviewing you. My 2 cents is, whenever you get levels of government all getting together to build something, by the time they check all the boxes, the per unit cost is so high, you haven't helped enough people. So, how do you convince governments to build cheaper housing?
Well, but I think the great experiment showed that. They had the guy, what they call $1 million Sam or Harry in New York or Seattle or wherever he was. The cost, when they actually took the accumulated cost, was costing the government like $1 million. To deal with him, like he'd fall on the road, and an ambulance or a fire truck would pick him up, and patch him together, take him to the hospital. Now he's in an acute care bed.
If you can look at the accounting that way, these solutions aren't as expensive.
So that's the point, right? But if you put Sam in a $145,000 housing unit with supports, it's actually a lot cheaper.
I'd like to see the next one come in at $145,000, though. That's not what we see.
Per unit.
Okay, well, maybe. Now, maybe we have to sort of move towards the end of this interview. A couple of things I want to ask you first.
Sure.
What are you most proud of from your 23 years?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I would say, if it wasn't sort of just the transformation of particularly the downtown, and the fact that people come to the city and feel really good about what they see. But on the other hand, it's just so the topic of homelessness really wasn't out of line, because I would say one of the great accomplishment is getting the Cardington built despite amazing opposition.
Oh.
It was going to be a drug gallery. It was going to attract prostitutes and pimps and drug dealers, and it was going to be horrible to be in that neighborhood. And I suggest if we go down now with your camera to St. Paul, and we go outside the Cardington, none of those fears ever came to fruition. And that
took some backbone.
Yes.
To hold steady on that plan.
Yeah. And so that's
proud of that.
Absolutely.
What's the what didn't get done? What's the unfinished business for the person who takes over your role?
Well, running a city, the cities go on look at Rome, right? Cities go on forever, and there's always lots of unfinished business. So you're in the river for a while, then you get out, right? I think dealing with integration of the water systems is an important, which I knew would never be something that'll be immediate. It's an evolution. I'd say that would be in the forefront of things that I personally think are important. But part of the problem is it'll go on, right? These projects come and go, and it'll always be there. So when I decided, as we talked about, off camera, that moment when you decide this will be the date, this is what I'm leaving. Is the recognition that things will be beyond you.
Yeah. So this city has been such a big part of your life.
Yes.
And you just push it aside. You're going to miss it, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think we're going to miss you too.
Thanks.
Ron Mattiussi, City Manager, City of Kelowna, retiring in March. Thanks for joining us on Kelownanow.com.